Welcome to the SAMA Podcast, where we talk to the most experienced people in B2B to find answers to one simple question. How can you become and remain essential to your strategic customers? Tune in as our guests reveal what it takes to become the supplier they cannot afford to lose. Learn how to level up your account management strategies to promptly deliver speed, convenience, and success to each customer. Let's jump into the discussion right now.
Hello, and welcome to the SAMA Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Nick Halverson, SAMA's editor-in-chief of Velocity Magazine, alongside Gordon Galzarano, SAMA's president and CEO. Gordon, I think I speak for both of us when I say that we are excited to launch what we envision as an ongoing series of insightful conversations on the critical elements driving successful strategic account management organization. These are really, kind of the building blocks of SAMA's knowledge architecture. And what we'd like to do is revisit each element one by one and dissect them, put them under a microscope, and really examine them and extract their value kind of with a new set of eyes and fresh perspectives for today's global SAM community. Gordon, does this sound about right to you?
It's spot on, Nick. And first, I think it goes without saying that it's not every day I get to spend time with SAMA's editor-in-chief. So it's always great to see you and start to cultivate the next generation of video podcast experiences for our community. So yeah, looking forward to jumping in.
Great. So that sounds fantastic, and agree. Let's just dive right in and start at the top
with
C-level and executive sponsorship. For sure, this is kind of like a foundational pillar for effective SAM programs. It's kind of like, I kind of see it as the first gate you need to walk through, kind of the entrance to the garden, so to speak. But, before we do any planting, you got to sow the seeds. So let's kind of start with strategic alignment. I kind of propose a question. How can C-level executives ensure that their sponsorship efforts align with the broader strategic goals of the organization and their strategic accounts?
Yeah, I'm glad we're starting there, because in conversations that I'm having with executives, there are a couple of what I would call critical success factors, Nick, even before we start to, as you say, sow the seeds. It starts first with culture, the organizational culture. And one of the first questions I ask CEOs or C-level executives in particular is, tell me a little bit about your organizational culture. And is customer centricity or customer obsession part of that culture? And I can tell very quickly whether it is or it isn't. Mm-hmm. And based on that, it then becomes this mantra of the CEO or the executive team. I oftentimes say it's more than just buying in, it's being in. It's part of the solution. It's part of the go-to-market. It's part of the cross-functional coalition, which then leads to your question around really how does that come to life? And the executives that get it right are the ones that have really curated, clearly defined objectives, starting with corporate strategy embedded in that customer obsession that we were talking about, leading to how the cross-functional organizations and that coalition, if you will, cross-functionally aligns to the strategic customers that the organization cares most about. And then the downstream impact. So first, it starts with defining those clear objectives. It's about the collaboration cross-functionally with departments that are accountable, responsible, and well-aligned. And they share goals and priorities in common. It's leveraging the insights about their customers to ensure that we truly have a comprehensive picture of who they are, what their priorities are, and how we should most effectively engage. And interestingly enough, that is probably the one piece, Nick, that I think is missing most. True discovery about getting inside of the heads of our most strategic customers. And do we really understand what's most important to them? And as importantly, are we relevant to them? And if so, how? How do we truly understand their world? Then align who we are to what that is, and then be able to demonstrate how we can directly or indirectly influence and impact those priorities.
Right. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. That sounds great. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the impact of innovation. Right now we're just sort of inundated with trends like AI that really stand to sort of revolutionize how everyone works, but especially in the strategic account management sphere.
Yeah.
So, with trends like AI, digital transformation,
Yeah.
and evolving customer expectations, how's the role of executive sponsorship evolved in creating value for strategic accounts using technology?
Well, you highlighted a couple of those. And I think if we just think about it, even as consumers or
Hmm.
members of the business community, this notion of an omni-channel experience
Right.
is becoming more and more pervasive. First of all, we're on information overload. Why? Because the number of sources that we leverage for information is growing and growing rapidly. And so part of what executives have to think about is how do I create an omni-channel experience that is intentional and differentiated so that I can get my customers' attention
Right.
in this sea of information? How can I create differentiation and therefore start to think about a personalized experience, which is where the puck is going?
Hmm.
How do we personalize our customers' experience when they do business with us? And from the top, how do we start to develop strategies and experiences that support it? And being able to leverage data, as you suggested,
Right.
AI and the progression very rapidly now of generative AI, doing a lot of the work for us and using that as a competitive advantage to use real time data and information to do predictive modeling, to create that personalized experience, and then start to create those omni channel experiences and through the channels that are available to them, what good looks like.
Right. So, thinking about challenges and solutions in this sphere, what are the most common challenges that organizations face when trying to secure consistent and meaningful executive sponsorship for
Yeah.
their strategic accounts, and
Yeah.
and how can they overcome them?
Well, great question. I'll start first with the challenges. What
Yeah.
executives tell me oftentimes is yes, we have a customer centric culture. Yes, we think we've got a pretty compelling corporate strategy that embeds the voice of our customers in it. But what's really interesting is when you peel back more of the layers of the onion, what they start to recognize is maybe there's a lack of alignment to the priorities and
Hmm.
the initiatives underpinning that strategy. So if you think about, we understand the what and the why, but how we go about it might be deficient. And a lot of that has to do with competing priorities,
Yeah.
competing commitments. The pace of change and the pace of disruption is accelerating. And that's causing a lot of upheaval in organizations where a lot of them are just treading water to keep their head above water.
Right.
And so their ability to then prioritize in the right way with the right outcomes is becoming more of a stress. But they recognize, wait a minute, we've got to back up. And this is a critical success factor because we're either going to be disruptors or we're going to get disrupted. And so that short term focus has to now pivot to more strategic, longer term priorities in service of what customers care about most. There are essential pieces, I think, to what customers care about, and irrespective of what what's going on in the marketplace, those things hold true over
Right.
the long term, and that's where the focus really needs to be. But you have to have the customer insights back to what we were just talking about, the data that supports who they are, what their priorities are, what they care about, and the outcomes that they're seeking. And if that piece of it is limited, if we're not putting the data that we have already to work with and for us to create that personalized experience,
Right.
then our ability to serve them in a unique way is challenging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I know, from
Yeah,
firsthand experience at SAMA, I know we're all very excited to sort of like leverage these new tools and sort of
yeah,
access this new data to,
yeah,
like you said, create that omni-channel approach. So, in terms of driving accountability, how can executive sponsors effectively balance their role as advocates for the
yeah,
customer while also driving accountability and performance within their own teams?
yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna address that, but I want to back up half a step because as I was outlining the challenges and we were
Mhm.
asking about the solutions, I think this also plays right into the accountability piece. So if I think
Right.
about what executives can do and what leaders can do within their organization today, it starts to then create this pivot, like we were talking about earlier, around clear criteria.
Hmm.
First of all, what is a strategic customer in our organization? And you were talking about SAMA expertise a moment ago and the work that
Right.
Joel and our team do to help organizations decide how to bifurcate or to segment their customers into those that are most strategic. And what
Hmm.
are the criteria that we should use that demonstrates, first of all, not just historical spend with us, but what is total addressable market? But the net is what we recognize is that if we have the right segmentation model of who first our strategic customers are, then we're
Right.
better positioned to serve and personalize that experience for them. And one of the things that I think has become a differentiating factor, as I mentioned at the start, Nick, we were talking about executive buy-in versus be-in.
Hmm.
When the executives are involved in the strategic planning process, when they're involved with their finger on the pulse of how the teams are really orchestrating value for customers, the more empathy then they bring to the table, the better the ability for that executive to guide the organization in the right direction. So structured, standardized engagement opportunities, being part of quarterly business reviews, encouraging the teams cross-functionally to collaborate, align, and execute, those are all important. Now, when you ask the question about driving accountability, at the end of the
Right.
day, it comes from the top, right? Those
Right.
clear expectations, modeling collaborative behavior, which I think it's to be said that here at SAMA, we're trying to create the SAMA on SAMA, what good looks like best practices. That
Right.
doesn't happen without me leading from the front, right? And enabling you and the broader team to
Right.
develop the value that our members, our partners, and our consultants expect. So that differentiation of modeling that collaborative behavior, I think, is a competitive differentiator, and it's probably one that gets undermined a bit. The other piece I think that's really important, we oftentimes talk about empowering teams
Mm.
to execute. I like to use the term enable
Hmm.
because I can empower you, Nick, to make a decision or to do something. But if I haven't enabled you and the resources and the capabilities behind you to execute,
Right.
you can have all the power in the world, but you can't deliver because the organization hasn't enabled you. So this is where the executives that I've been talking to most recently would say they're starting to pivot and they're starting to save to invest in certain areas, to
Hmm.
invest and grow in other areas because they recognize they've got to make those shifts to enable their organizations to have and demonstrate value. So I think the other piece, it's so funny because I was just talking to a CEO the other day and he was talking about we're having such great success, Gordon. I'm so excited about the transitions that we're making and it's starting to show up in how our customers and our partners view us. And I couldn't be happier. And he said, "What's next?" I said, "Celebrate success with them, right? Throw a
Right.
party. Like you have done something that is hard. You have done something that has demonstrated not just words on a slide about customer centricity. You've done it.
Right.
You're starting to transform your organization in support of your most important customers. It's time to celebrate. Work's not done, but you've achieved and have reached a base camp that a lot of organizations otherwise haven't. So I strongly encourage you to take time out with your team and celebrate a bit.
Right. And, speaking from personal experience, kind of little inside baseball of Sama, I feel like that's, you know, of the many things we do, that's kind of like number one, what we do well is working well, as a small team, but also celebrating success. And I think, if you've, entered the picture as the new president and CEO, I've really sort of like, walked forward and driven with that sort of mindset in place. And
Yeah.
I think that that's key to sort of like setting all of us up for success for the future. So yeah, I'm
Well,
excited
thank
to
you for that.
hear you sort of elaborate on that a little bit more because I think that's a nice transition in doing that in, working cohesively as a team, celebrating success. I mean, I feel like those elements are really what bind and foster like really strong long-term relationships.
Yeah.
So that's kind of leads into my next question. What strategies should executive sponsors adopt to deepen that trust and foster long-term relationships with strategic customers, especially during periods of market volatility
Yeah.
or economic uncertainty, which it seems like that's the case, always the
Yeah.
case these days.
Yeah. You know, I literally had this same conversation earlier this week, Nick, and we were talking about the lumpiness of big deals in their organization. These are like tens of millions of dollar transactions. And so it's feast or famine, where last year they rang the bell and
Right.
had tremendous success in a certain situation. But they know in 2025 it's going to be slim pickings because now it's more about executing against the commitments of 24, but they know that the spend isn't going to be what it was last year.
Right.
And we were talking about how they can really, this is the time to get closer to that customer. Your teams now have the opportunity to really get into a series of discussions and get wider and deeper in the organization,
Right.
because there's never a better time to do that. What do most sales teams do? They're on to the next transaction. This is about what we do in between.
Right.
And what I have seen through research and other engagements is the closer we get to our customers at these times, the better. And so at Stamma, part of the expertise I think we bring to our community is the thought leadership around things like customer engagement programs. And whether that's through the motion of creating an executive advisory board where we bring our strategic customers together to share our vision, our strategy with them, and get them in a very safe environment to share unguarded where we should go, how we should get there, where are they trying to go more importantly, and does our strategy fit align to what they're trying to do? So when we talk about fostering relationships longer term, the more we can create stickiness and draw our strategic customers closer to us, the higher the probability we have longer term impact. But it also solves some of the problems we were talking about earlier, the challenges about how can I create a personalized experience? Well, if I'm engaging with them more intimately and I have a deeper empathy for what they're trying to do, I can create a personalized experience that they want and that they need. Second is, if I'm bringing my customers closer to me through customer advisory boards and other engagement type programs, then I've got more of a real-time finger on the pulse of both the challenges and the opportunities that they're trying to seek, what's next, and how do we have to respond then to meet those expectations and requirements that they might have.
Right.
And what it also starts to do, Nick, the executives that are doing it and the teams that are doing it, is it starts to create the environment for co-creation, co-value opportunities. How can we start to bring the best of our organizations together to create something that's unique, different, and special in service of all?
Yeah.
And so now you're creating that environment. You're pulling them closer. You're recognizing more real time access and information that really does create value beyond the transaction and sets up not only the longer term customer relationship but longer term customer value.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Gordon. That kind of wraps it up from my end. Do you have any sort of like 30,000-foot view
Yeah.
thing you need to add or want to add before we say goodbye?
Well, maybe, Nick, just a minute or two, if it's okay. I'd like to talk a little bit about where I think Stamma is going, because just as we have talked about executive sponsors, strategic customer engagement, strategic account management, key account management, all of that, what Stamma will become is a use case for what good looks like. We're on a multi-year journey, as you know, to start to plant those seeds that you were talking about in the garden. And we're already starting to see areas where we think we can create value and differentiation and encourage our community to lean in and talk to us about it. And I'll position it in three dimensions, all through the lens of the members and the customer organizations we serve. First, how do we engage them? So we've implemented a member lifecycle management process through our customer success team, where it's more intentional, high touch engagement with our members throughout the year, where we can make recommendations based on their priorities and opportunities, where we can start to bring value to them through
Yeah.
SAMA-led IP, but also through our partner and consulting-led IP, engaging them not just in the what, the why, but back to what I was saying earlier, how. How do they do it? So there's a really important thread of initiatives and priorities that we've now executed against and will continue to. In that middle piece around our partners, how do we continue to help amplify who our partners are, who they are, what they do, and the value proposition they bring to our community as well. And so we've got a lot of work underway, as you know, with them. And then also looking at that new series of partners, because as you were talking about technology disruption and so forth, who are the organizations that we should be partnering with because they're on the tip of the spear
Right.
of some of that disruption and transformation that's happening. And then in the third piece, back to SAMA on SAMA, investing in new ways of marketing to get our message out, our brand proposition and value to the market, our teams, how we invest in next generation podcasting, webinars, and other multimedia motions to allow our members and community to lean in to get more value from who we are and also what we do. And that also, by the way, comes in the form of research. SAMA on SAMA research, data and insights that we have, just as we were talking about executives and the way they need to think. We've got so much rich, curated, valuable content that sits in our resource library today. How do we now lean into that and using some of the technology tools and AI to extract value, right? Shine a light on how that data could be put to work in support of our community and our members at large. So as they're making decisions, SAM is part of that decision-making process with and for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sort of like shining a light of where SAMA is headed in the next year. I know, we always talk about that big things are afoot at SAMA. And I think over the next year, people are really going to sort of, be impressed with some of the pivots we're making. And, we're absolutely excited to be a part of that. And before we go, I'd be remiss to not give a quick plug for the latest issue of Velocity Magazine, which I'm going to add a link below here. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, please do. There's some good new pieces in that. And Gordon, thanks so much for joining me today. And to everyone listening, we just want to say stay tuned. Big things are on the horizon for SAMA. And we certainly plan to keep this ongoing series of discussions going on the critical elements of successful SAM organizations. So stay tuned. And Gordon, thanks so much for joining us today.
Nick, thank you. You mentioned Velocity. That is our marquee publication. It is so high quality and the feedback we get about it is remarkable. And it's not possible without the work that you do along with Amy and the others on the team. So I thank you because it is a great body of work. So thanks for all that you do for SAMA and will continue to do for SAMA, Nick. And I appreciate your time today. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope today's wisdom will lead you down the path of experiencing success in your profession. Remember, the key to successful strategic account management is discovering where your customer wants to go and helping them get there. Subscribe to our podcasts at strategicaccounts.org. We hope you will leave a positive rating and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. If there's something we can do to improve our podcasts, please let us know. That's all for today. See you on the next one.